So let me just do what I always do, which is cut the human being in various parts. Iron, bronze, silver, gold, and what we call transcendence, and eventually what we call unity. You have people belonging either to this category, this, or this, or this, or this. And as you go higher, it becomes a bit more complex. Your circle shrinks. You can only maybe find one here of 8 billion people on this planet. The majority of people are here for good reasons. Now, iron refers to the genitalia. It's a place of passion. It's a place of immediate desires. It's our, kind of like what Freud had argued about our id center. We just want things. And we want them for good reasons, because life has a tendency of robbing us of pleasure. And so we seek things that will give us pleasure. And none of us in this class have the patience to make a lot of sacrifice to find pleasures that are actually good for us. So we always pursue things that are easy to get. One of, at least in the 21st century, if you want to know what the pleasures in the iron stage looks like, pornography, sex, drinking, smoking, just, stupid, ridiculous lifestyles that are very easy and cheap to get. Now, given that some of you in this class have some age on you, that you're no longer 18, you just didn't graduate from high school, you made some mistakes, you left, dropped out of high school, you pursued your passions in life, and you came to realize that, well, you're not really moving forward at all. So what you've done is you said, you know what, I'm going to pursue a different kind of pleasure. And you move into the bronze area. Bronze really, for the most part, have to do with the abdomen. It's a place of power, okay? Now remember, whenever you want to pursue anything in life, you need resources. If you want to come to my office, the resource you want is the courage. Not money, not coffee, not even questions initially. You need to get over your nervousness. You need to come to the office and knock on the door. That's your resource. If you don't have that, what you'll only have is a desire to come to the office, but you'll never will. So remember, to obtain anything in life, you need power. So when it comes to the abdomen area, some of you in this class who are over the age of 18 or 19 or 20, you say, I've wasted enough of my life. I want to make my life something more than immediate gratification. So you sign up for classes. And the moment you sign up for classes, you're mostly, for the most part, future-oriented. It's no longer having sex and having an orgasm 10 minutes later. It's no longer drinking and having fun 3 hours later. It's no longer smoking and walking with Jesus Christ on clouds and then dropping down. This means you have to now make more sacrifices. If here, your pleasure is going to be given to you in 10 minutes, here you have to wait for 2 years to graduate from Laney. So as you move up, your sacrifices become a bit more complex. You become a bit more complex. Your desires become a bit more complex. Here, you can see the outcome, feel the outcome of what it means to get high, what it means to drink, what it means to hang out with losers. They are immediate. You only need to wait 10 minutes. Here, you have no idea what's going to happen if you graduate. If you're going to get a job, if you're going to get a job you like, if you're going to take classes you enjoy, if you'll have instructors who are crummy or not. So here, you walk into the unknown. These two areas, for the most part, are profoundly selfish. It's about you, it's about your life, it's about your fun. Then comes the chest area, which we call silver. For the first time, something happens to you, which is you've had enough immediate pleasures that you now are aware that they won't really take you very far. Here, you have your diploma, you have a job, you have money, you have your own one-bedroom apartment in which you live. But something very strange happens to you, and for the first time you say, I really want to share my life with someone. You're not 18, you're not 20, you're not 25, you're not 30, you're not 40. Your life, for the most part, when it comes to pleasures of the body and the power that you get from education, from getting a job, from having money, you have those now. Now you want to share them. And silver is a place where you want to actually share your life with another human being. This is a place of relationships. And maybe you want to go back in time and mend your relationship with your father, with your mother, with your friends. It doesn't really matter. But this is about serious relationships where you're truly invested. Now, these three areas have to do with your physical life. And it is important. I don't care if you are interested in this class and you want to go get your master's in hopes of being in the classroom and talking about philosophy, religious studies, or humanities, and inspire yourself and inspire people. It may be that you may walk in the classroom and realize you're just awful. Regardless of how bad or good you may be, the money you get from this job will nourish the sort of pleasures that are needed in your life. You will have children. Children need immediate gratification. You need money to pay rent, to make sure that your wife, your kids, your companion are happy, that you can help your parents. If you're missing these two components, there's a good chance that even if you're very serious about your relationship, because you have never been able to overcome immediate gratification, and relationships are tough, there's a good chance that because you didn't graduate from this area well, and you didn't graduate from this area well, this is not going to last. Relationships require money and power. Without them, you will lose. Now, when you start going to school, you will learn how to be patient. It will socialize you in a completely different way. It's very much like me telling you to do an assignment, even though you don't like it. Your companion will tell you wash dishes, even though you don't like it. Now, there comes a point, I suppose, where what we talked about death. And it doesn't really have to be your body kind of just failing you. You kind of look yourself one day in the mirror, you look at your life, and it's like emotionally you become dead to your life. Nothing about your life interests you. You look at your kids and you say to yourself, well, they're grown now. I don't really care for them that much. They have a bit more autonomy, a bit more power, they can manage their own lives. You look at your own companion and you say, well, there was a time where him and I or her and I used to get along and kind of meet eye to eye, but now that stage is gone. Even though I enormously like her, I can't see my own reflection in her. And all of a sudden what happens is you have a house, but it's not a home. You have a marriage, but it's not really a relationship. You have children, but you're not really a father. You have a job, but it's no longer an extension of what you are. And when you get to this place where you examine, like the salmon fish, the sort of life you have led for the past 30, 40, 50 years, all of a sudden you realize you want to divorce your life. It doesn't mean you want to physically walk out, but it does suggest that emotionally you just can't find your own reflection in any of the things that you've accumulated for the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And this is devastating. Because what we do here is we create stories. And these stories give us relevance, meaning, identity, and a sense of belonging. There is a story that was told to us, I'm not quite sure by who. It's about this man who ends up in some sort of a prison. His cellmate is a young man. And this old man looks at this young man and says, wow, I've been sitting back and listening to your stories for the past few weeks. It seems that despite you only being 40 and me being like 90, you've had such a rich life. Why don't we do a swap? Every morning you give me one of your stories for $1,000. You sell me a story, I'll give you $1,000. And then you can give that money to your friends, to your parents, to your siblings, since they don't really have very much money. And the young man says, let me think about this for a while. He says, there's only one catch, the old man tells him, that once you sell me a story from your life, it'll be deleted or erased from your memory bank. So every morning this young man looks at this old man and sells him a story and gets $1,000. 2, 3, 4, 5 years pass by, and one morning he gets up to again tell a story, only to realize there are no stories left. His memory is blank. He is nobody. So he hangs himself. The only reason why most of us in this class continue with life is because of the narratives we create for ourselves. Even if you happen to be with an alcoholic, the only reason why you continue with the relationship is the narrative of hope. Even though as a young woman you know that the guy you're with is no good for you and can't be good for you because he is young, hope is the driving force. Without those narratives, we won't survive. So when it comes to the iron and bronze and silver, once you're done with the pleasures of the genitalia, the pleasures given to you by the abdomen, the pleasures of emotional relationships, once you realize they can no longer fulfill or satisfy certain parts of you, little by little you will divorce. Now, for most of us, of course, in this class, we're not going to do that. We will do whatever we possibly can to hang on to what little we have. There's going to be a good amount of conflict in this day and age. I suppose you'll seek therapy, you'll seek some sort of medication. That's just the way things seem to be going these days. At a certain point, someone who becomes discontent with all of this, kind of like Plato, who wanted to be a lawyer, who wanted to be a politician, who wanted to be a playwright, comes to say, you know what, I have encountered this man named Socrates. He doesn't want my body, he doesn't want my money, the only thing he wants my mind. But he doesn't really want my mind unless it's empty. There is something about him, there is something that he has on the inside, and I don't really know what it is. What he has on the inside is called eudaimonia, the demon of happiness. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, but there is something about our organism that senses when someone has something. You want to call it magnetism, you can. You want to call it charisma, you can. You want to call it spirit. It doesn't really matter what name you want to give it. So what happens is you gravitate towards this thing called gold. I suppose if you are familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave, it's the sun that he sees. Or for those of you in this class who are addicted to anything, alcohol, drugs, video games, the sun, I suppose, would be you walking away from this particular addiction. Lots of suffering, lots of sacrifice, lots of conflict. You walk away, you go back, you walk away, you go back. You go through this yo-yo syndrome for many, many, many years until one day you realize your sacrifices are paying off. You're able to stay away from the bottle or the video games for like 5 or 6 or 7 hours, if not days or months. Now, without making it too complex, all these different individuals have a certain amount of richness to them. They have on their shelf certain things they can offer and no more. So you can, in fact, fall in love at the iron stage. And one of the interesting things about us is that you look at someone and feelings are just going to be generated. And we are guided by those particular feelings. We move towards the object of attraction. And when you spend time with someone, they just grow. They grow on you. And so what happens is there comes a point where, very much like the diagram we had here, you realize even though you're like 12 and there is nothing interesting about your life, you in fact do have the ability and the power to fall in love. And you do. And you do write poetry. You do sit by the phone for many, many hours. And you feel as if without the presence of this other person, you have no soul inside you, like they have your heart. They've taken it out. And the only person who's able to give that heart back to you is that particular person. The only problem with the iron stage of falling in love is that the physical intimacy, in as much as it is intense, it is beautiful, there comes a point where after 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, there is something about us that desires substance, meaning, depth. And when you're 18 and when you're down here, you can't offer those things to anyone. And relationships have inside them a world of politics. You have to be mindful of your own emotions, mindful of the other person's emotions. So pleasure down here is really just defined in a very, very superficial way, but it can sustain a relationship for some time. And then it just goes bad. Now, one of the things you need to understand about, before we get to these areas, let me say a couple of things about how I have 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, touch, and taste. These 5 windows connect me to the physical world. Without them, I would be nothing. These create memories for me. What these things, these 5 windows will do for me is they generate experiences. Some experiences are positive. Let's just call them happy. Some experiences are negative. Let's call them pain. And some experiences are neutral. Whether they're there or not, it doesn't really matter. You will never gravitate towards pain unless you have found that in pain, you can be creative. In pain, you can find inspiration. In pain, you can be a poet. But that's for very, very advanced people. For most of us, we just pursue things that give us pleasure. And then the sort of animals that we are, we want this pleasure to be repeated. For those of you in this class who have ever experienced like physical intimacy, is that you try to be engaged in that particular human activity as long as you possibly can. Why? Because as long as you can be physically engaged, the pleasure will continue. The moment you are satisfied, the pleasure ends. And if the relationship has a good amount of superficial components in it, once you have climaxed, there's a great amount of feelings of shame and guilt and disgust. So there is something out there, and I don't know what it is, let's just say it's a woman. And I'm here, and I look at her, and there is a sense of attraction. How, why, when, who, I don't really know. All I know is that some people I have certain things about them. I look at them and I say, man, that's exciting. عشق اصطلاب و اسرار خداست. If you want to know how attraction comes about, it's one of those mysterious things of God. We don't know, only God knows. We talked about this the other day, but at this stage you have elements of curiosity and interest. Now, if the attraction stays with you for a while, now this is passive. It's the siblings of attraction. It generates on its own. You don't need to do anything. All you know is that there is something about you that says, interesting. If the curiosity and interest remain, these two elements, if they stay with you, now you become actively curious and actively interested, which means that you will come to my office, you will knock on the door. It's no longer passive. And the moment you become actively interested, it means that you have given it some thought about the class, about me, about you, about your life, about your future. Now, it doesn't mean that just because now it's been actively initiated that you're going to stick with it. This is like anything else in life. There are lots of vultures out there, lots of things to be interested and attracted to, and they could at any time come by and snatch that interest. So remember, a human being is nothing but a container. And the physical world, whatever it is out there, they're trying to generate desires, interest, and pursuits. Once you get to a place of active curiosity and interest, there comes a point where all of a sudden you say, I desire to know. For the first time, you have this desire inside you. Attraction is not desire. Curiosity is not desire, unless you want to just say, semantically speaking, that it is some kind of a desire. That may be so, but now you actually just focus on that thing for a little bit. Now, whenever you have a desire, it could be passing. In other words, it could stay with you for 10 minutes. It can stay with you for 10 hours or 10 months or 10 years. The moment you have a desire, you have a certain amount of poverty inside you. I want you. I'm curious as to why you keep showing up to this class. Now, from this point on, the question is, am I willing to spend time to see why I'm curious about you and why I'm interested in you? Now, this poverty can only grow because I show more interest, or it can diminish because I just lose interest in you. So whenever you desire something, you're in a place of you don't have. And what you want is you want to have. Now, to get what you don't have, you need resources. If you're down here, if you want to get high, you need money, or you need loser friends. If you want to get done with school, these people down here are not going to be good resources. If you want to graduate from Laney, you can't hang out with losers, people on the iron, because they're always going to kind of tell you, drop out of school. That class is no good. What are you doing? Let's just go have fun. If you're up here, you want to have a solid relationship, don't go out with people who are just about making money and fulfilling their own desires. So remember, every group has its own community of people that can either support you or derail you. So as you and I spend more time, and right now let's just say 20% of your interior is occupied by this class and me, 80 other percent is just the rest of the stuff that you do in life. As you and I spend more time together, what happens is now 50% of me is occupied inside you. So there is infatuation, there is obsession, and then there is love. When you get to this place, I am inside you all the way, metaphorically speaking. Even though you want to focus on other things, it's going to be somewhat difficult. Now, there are 3 stages that you go through. Now, the first thing that you need to understand about love is that first, it's emotional. It starts as a tiny little seed of a feeling. When the feelings are repeated, it turns into an emotion. Emotions always have history inside them. You don't go to a therapy because your father just looked at you and said, you're stupid. You go to therapy because for the past 50 years, he's looked at you and said, you're stupid. Now you have an emotional crisis. The only reason why you end up in this place called love is because this tiny little seed has exploded into this emotion. Remember, all love relationships, whether you are falling in love with Snoop Dogg or Jesus Christ, it is initially a feeling, then emotions. Now, one of the things about emotions is that they ultimately want to be housed in a physical container. It's no longer enough for me to look at you. From emotions, I need to get close to your physical body. It's the only vehicle where I can see my own emotions in language. If you read the Gospel of John, what you have is the Spirit of God, and then you have the flesh called Jesus Christ. Once I have you physically, right now, and I'm interested, and you know that you're mine, and you know that I'm yours, and there is this thing called love, my journey in you begins. Journey in you. I want to figure out who you are, what you are. Now, this is going to be paused for a little bit because for the first time, I am now physically close to you. I explore who you are and who I am through our physical intimacy. And there is nothing wrong with it. There comes a point where I am saturated by the physical intimacy. I still would like to be in the bedroom with you, washing our clothes, right? But at a certain point, I say, you know what, this is fun. Why don't we go out, have dinner? And while you're having dinner, from the feelings to the body, now I tap into your intellect. I want to know your history a little bit, who you are, what your passions are. And the intellectual part is going to be really tough. If I am down here and you are up here, there is nothing we have in common. But for you to understand this, it's going to take you about 2 years. Which means that 2 years of your life will be wasted on me. Remember, desires can only last as long as you have interest. The moment the interest goes away, and all interests will go away. If, on the other hand, you're in love with someone like a Jesus Christ or a Socrates, that's like a swimming pool or an ocean that's like 500 feet deep. The only reason why you may walk away from a Socrates is because you're just emotionally exhausted by diving every day. So remember, initially is journey towards, then journey in. There comes a point where emotionally, I know how it feels to love you. Physically, I know how it feels to love you. Intellectually, if you ever get there. To some extent, I know your history. I like some of it. You like some of mine. There comes a point where my desire has been satisfied. There is really nothing more I want to know about you. Instead of like being in the bedroom like every day, it's now every other day. It's maybe once a week, maybe once a month. And in long-term relationships, maybe just never. And when I come home, I don't really care about how you're feeling today. I want to know if there is food on the table. And I don't really care about your interpretation of Adam and Eve. I would just want to be left alone. And now enters the politics of relationships. As most of you know, I had a teacher for about 10, 12 years of my life, and then he became a family friend. The story that he used to tell me when we used to go to gatherings once in a while is that he was, I think, 27, 28, and his wife was maybe 20. And so they had a chance to meet and speak to each other for maybe a couple of hours. And the first thing he said to her was, listen, I love philosophy and I love history of religious traditions. My life is going to be devoted to understanding philosophy, religion. I want to write, I want to think, I want to travel and figure out the meaning of life. That's who I am, that's what I am. If you like those things, I'll marry you. If you don't like those things, I don't want to waste my time. And she said, yeah, I love those things as well. And they had a very rich life before his passing. And so the point I'm trying to make is sometimes what happens is you're actually unclear as to what it is that you want. You're down here, but you meet someone that's up here. And if they have enough power inside them, and if there is something very attractive about them that you see and experience, they have the power to push you to go here and then here quickly. If there is depth in your pursuits in life, there's a good chance that your desires, instead of being satisfied after a year or 2 or 3, they'll be satisfied in 20 years.